Alrighty guys, welcome back to another one. A few minutes ago, literally a few minutes ago, I was looking through this cookbook here and I found a recipe for 16 gauge that my mind instantly went to. That would be great for sandhill crane or other things like that. Well, I just had to share it with you, so that's what we're doing here. We're using some nickel plated lead number 2 shot here. Yeah, this is going to be a good one. Now when you think number 2 shot, most people think steel. Well, this is lead. Sandhill cranes are not waterfowl. At least here in Kentucky. I'm not sure about other places, but here in Kentucky they are not considered waterfowl. Lead shot is absolutely okay to use on those. And apparently they taste delicious, Josh has told me. So we're going to put together an 1.25 ounce assembly of it here today using the nickel plated lead number 2 shot. The velocity is going to be 1345 FPS, a true 16 gauge Magnum assembly. So we're using this stuff right here for it. 40. This is one of my favorites. It's great for Magnum stuff, like legit Magnum things in the larger bores. The wad, the CSD 16. Very, very good non-tox wad here. By the way, this is all component for component. 1/8 inch, besides this, 1/8 inch 20 gauge fiber cushion wad. The recipe calls for a 1/8 inch felt wad. I don't have any 1/8 inch 20 gauge felt wads, so I have to sub it out for a 1/8 inch fiber cushion wad. That should not make any difference in the pressure. These are just used as fillers and cushioning. I do have the 1/4 inch 20 gauge felt wads, but I don't really feel like cutting those in half because that is kind of difficult to do, believe it or not. It is just really soft material, but it's hard to cut in half. So I guess that's pretty much it. We don't need any buffer here because we're not trying to get this to pattern screaming tight. This is meant for wing shooting, if you will. If the camera angle looks kind of weird here, it's because my tripod is outside in the car and I don't feel like walking outside and getting it. Yes, I am that lazy. So, stack of buffer cans it is again. But guys, I forgot to mention this. We are using a Rio hull. The PSI on this is 9,900, which is fairly low for what this is. Now, if you don't have any Rios, because as far as I can tell, they're not really producing these anymore for the USA market. I don't know. But if you don't have any Rios, use a Shadite or Fiocchi. Start at 36 because we're using 40. Start at 36 and work your way up until you get to the speed around 1350. So yeah, 9,900 PSI, 1345 FPS, and 1 1/4 ounces of lead. That's a pretty good 16 gauge assembly if I ever saw one. Normally 1.25 ounces is reserved for 12 gauge or 3 inch 20 gauge turkey assemblies. I can't say the word that starts with L if you guys know what I'm talking about. But yeah, 16 gauge with 1.25 ounces used to be a very common shell way back in the day. Actually, up until about 6 or 7 years ago, it was still being produced, but not anymore. Gotta make them ourselves. So without further ado, 40. Now we need the CSD 16. Mine are unslit, so if you see these little windows right here in the wad, you need to cut into those. Those are the hinge points for the pedals. We have noticed the CSD 16, if you don't cut it all the way down to the bottom of the wad and you're not using a ported choke, some pellets, especially with buckshot, have a tendency not to leave the wad, and the wad will punch a hole through the patterning board if you're shooting at a patterning board. If you're shooting at game, we'll call it game, you don't want this to be essentially a slug, so it's best just to, unless you're using a ported choke, cut that all the way into the little windows. And this did a pretty good job. I am using Gary Caskey's 4-pedal adjustable 10 gauge wad trimmer. Yep, it is 410 gauge, but it does work for 10, 12, 16, and most 20 gauge wads, which is very, very handy. And as always, it cuts a beautiful slit. They're all even is what I was trying to say. Nice uniform pedals. Anyway, facebook.com/gary.d.caskey if you want any of his tools. Now we need to get that wad inserted, give it a little bit of pressure. Now, stack height on this one is kind of high, guys. You really gotta mess with the crimp to get it to come out right, but it's okay. Next, we need a 1/8 inch 20 gauge cushion wad or filler wad, whatever you want to call them, whether that be cork, felt, or fiber cushion. In my case, it needs to be 1/8 of an inch. Look at that in there, and then I'm using Gary Caskey's wad tamper or wad nudger to seat that, and there we go. Now we're ready for our shot, of which I have right here in this 10 gauge shell 1 1/4 ounces exactly of nickel plated number 2s. Give that a shake, and all of it, I will try my best to show you, all of it sits inside the wad. Maybe these are translucent enough to where you can, yeah, there you go. You can see the where the wad ends. No pellets are above it. They are all in that wad. So next we need our crimp, whether it be 6 or 8. You can even do a roll if you want to, but I like a 6-point crimp myself. They just seem to come out the best on the Leloadall here. Ooh, I said that word. But I have my Rabasator here. It is a sort of a middle crimp. I'll stick it right here, that way you guys can better see it. And this is what it does. If I had it lined up right. That almost closed it up once again, but it's supposed to create a lip around the center of the hull. Let's give it a little bit more, maybe I can show you, I don't know. I guess the Rabasator is not going to play along today. I'll try one more time. It's not supposed to pretty much fully close it like that. That probably did it, yeah. And we pretty much have a finished crimp there, although again, that's not really what it's supposed to do. Go ahead and run it through your final crimp. And we end up with a crimp that looks like this. And guys, it's not absolutely perfect, but again, that's because stack height on this one is kind of high. The hull is very full, but there it is. There is the end result, a relatively deep set crimp. It's not going to pop back open, I can guarantee you that, but there's no taper. I'll hit that with a Got B&2 off camera after I finish out the video. So as you see, that's pretty easy and fun to put together. Well, I don't know if you guys would call it fun, but it is for me. It is exactly like throwing together something you would use for a turkey, but using a little bit bigger shot. And well, if you're wing shooting, use a modified choke maybe, whatever you guys want to do. I guess it really depends on how far out you're shooting them. Number 2 shot lead is pretty cool stuff. Winchester actually markets a shell 20 gauge 2 3/4 inch that has number 2 shot in it, lead again, and it's copper plated, and guess what they market that as? A home defense / personal protection shell. They are pretty cool. If you guys want to see a breakdown on those, let me know. I can get those locally. Needless to say, you could use these as a long-range pheasant option if you want to. I bet they would work pretty good for that. Obviously, rabbits, I probably wouldn't use these on squirrel. Shot's a little bit too large, you might do more harm than good. I meant to the meat, not the squirrel itself. But anyway, guys, I guess that's going to end this one here. Like and subscribe if you want to. We always appreciate that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below, and we'll get back to you. And if you want to, go check out our Patreon. It's as low as $1 a month, and you guys get early access to content. A link to that, as well as a link to our Instagram, Rumble, and merch store, will be in the description below. But other than that, you guys take it easy. We'll see you in the next one.